that you're all doing well. Hopefully your families are safe and you guys are getting on well. So the last couple of days we've been working with surface area and volume of a cone. Before that, surface area and volume of a cylinder, surface area and volume of a prism. Today, what we're going to start working with is a pyramid. Today we're going to be working with a surface area of a pyramid. Right? A pyramid. Now most of you actually have an idea of what a pyramid is. It's exactly what you think it is, what they look like in Egypt. So you have a pyramid, right? But before that, you have a triangle. And since we're talking about three-dimensional figures, a pyramid's going to look something like that, right? And remember, since that's the front, you also have the part that's in the back, right, that we don't see. So this is a pyramid. Since we're dealing with surface area, what we're going to be dealing with is finding out how much is actually on the outside of a pyramid. So whenever we're working with the surface area of a pyramid, there is a formula that we always use. And that surface area is going to be capital B, and I'll explain, plus a half, capital P, and then L. And again, I'll explain all that. I'll also explain why some are capital and others are lowercase. So the difference now between this and what we've been dealing with the other ones is that whenever we're dealing now with base and perimeter, they actually represent something more specific. So capital B is going to represent the area of the base. And again, it sounds more complicated, but it's pretty simple once you get the hang of it. Capital B represents the area of the base. It's how much area is actually on the base down here. Capital P represents perimeter of the base. Right? Perimeter of the base. Just the base. So the B represents the area of the base, how much is actually on the base. P represents perimeter of the base. And remember, perimeter is always how much is going around the outside. So if we're looking at the base, we see that it's a rectangle, right? Just to show you guys. The base is a rectangle in this case. Perimeter would be how much is actually going around on the outside. And to figure out perimeter, what you would do, and I'll show you that, is just add up how much is on the base. But we'll get to that then. And then L, what L represents, L literally just represents the length of the side. Length of the pyramid. So the length of the pyramid. Sorry, I got a little sloppy there. So what I mean by that is the length represents literally how long this is going to be here. Right? That's what L represents, how long the actual pyramid is along the side. P represents the perimeter of the base. B represents the area of the base. So let me do a couple of examples just to start showing you guys what all of this represents. And my advice to you is very simple. Figure out what the base is, figure out what the perimeter of the base is, and once you figure out the area and the perimeter, this becomes so much easier to work with. So let's try this out with a few numbers. Let's say that this here is 4 centimeters, right? So we know that this length is 4. We know that this length here is going to be 3 centimeters. And let's say that the length of the actual pyramid, let's call it 5 centimeters, right? So the one that we know for sure at the moment, the one that we definitely know is that L represents 5, right? So we know that that's 5 because that's how long the pyramid is. So we know that L is 5. Let me write this here. And if I run out of space, I'm sorry. So we know that L is 5. Now we want to figure out what B is, and we want to figure out what P is. So to figure out B, remember, B represents the area of the base. So since the base is a rectangle, the way that you find area of a rectangle is you would do length times width, right? Length times width, base times height. So again, B just represents the area of the base. So the only two terms that we care about for the base are the length 4 and the width is 3, which would give us 12. And again, let me show you where this came from. We know that length here was 4. We know that the width was 3 because it's a rectangle, right? We know that that's the length, we know that that's the width. So 4 was L, 3 was W. 4 was the length of the base, 3 was the width of the base. So we did 4 times 3, and 4 times 3 is 12. So we know that the base is 12. Okay? Now to find the perimeter of the base, and this is the one thing you've got to be careful with. To find the perimeter of the base, we can't forget that whenever you're finding perimeter, you have to add up all the sides that are on the base, right? So we know that this side here is 4. So that's 4 right there, right? We know that this side there is 3. But since we're talking about the perimeter of the entire base, we can't forget the back and we can't forget the left. Since it's a rectangle, if the front is 4, we know that the back is also going to be 4, right? And if the right is 3, we know that the left here is also going to be 3 as well. Let me get rid of that so it doesn't confuse you with a 13. So again, just to show you, we got 4, 3. We know that if the front is 4, we know that the back has to be 4. And if the right's 3, we know that the left has to be 3, just because, again, it's perimeter. And whenever it's perimeter, you want to add up all of the sides, right? All the sides we want to add up. And that's how we figure out the perimeter, by just adding up everything. So we're going to add up to 4 plus 3 plus the 4 plus 3. And again, we're adding just because it's perimeter. Whenever you want to find perimeter, you just add up all the sides. And we know that 4 plus 3 is 7. 7 plus 4 is 11. 11 plus 3 is 14. Right there. And like that. So once you find all this, it's pretty simple to work with after that. But the hardest part is just finding it out, right? And again, let me just show you just to make sure you guys get it. We know that L is 5 because that's the length. That's how long the pyramid is. To figure out the area of the base, you would just do length times width, and 4 times 3 is 12 for the base. To figure out P, perimeter of the base, you need to add up all 4 sides of the base. And in this case, we have 4 plus 3. Can't forget the 4 in the back, and we can't forget the 3 on the side. Just forget. Don't ever forget. Just because they don't write the number doesn't mean that it's not there. And when we add up 4, 3, 4, and 3, gives us 14. Now, once we have that, it's just substituting it into that formula, which becomes so much easier. And again, let me just write the formula, just so you guys can actually see where I'm writing everything. So we have B plus a half PL. And once we're here, we know that area of the base is 12. Right? Plus, we know that the half is there. Right? We know that the perimeter of the base is 14. Right? And we know that the length is 5. And again, all I did was just substitute. We know that the area of the base, B, is 12, plus sign, half. We know that the perimeter of the base, P, is 14. And we know that the length, L, is 5. And once you have this, just be careful, because before you start adding, you always want to multiply. So before you start taking care of the 12, take care of everything here. So the first thing you can deal with is parentheses, right? So let's write everything else over. We got 12 plus a half. And since it's next to it, whenever you have 2 terms with nothing between it, it means multiplication, right? So we're going to do 14 times 5. 14 times 5 is going to give us 70, right? And again, I got the 70 because I did 14 times 5, right? 14 times 5 was 70. And once you have this, it becomes a lot easier because again, before you want to add, you have to make sure that you multiply, right? So we want to take care of the half of 70. So let's bring down the 12. Let's bring down the plus, right? We know that half of 70 is 35, right? And if you don't feel comfortable doing half of 70, you can always do 70 divided by 2. Because we know that 70 divided by 2 will also give us 35. Same thing. Same exact thing. So we know that 70 divided by 2 is 35, right? We did half of 70 gave us 35. We had a 12 there. And the last step, it's just adding them up. And once we add them up, 12 plus 35 gives us 47. And we know that since it's surface area, right, it's going to be centimeters. And whenever we're dealing with area, it's always squared. always squared. So we have an answer of 47 centimeters squared. And again, what that represents is how much space is actually on the outside of the figure. In this case, it's a pyramid. Again, once you get to this, it becomes a lot easier, but it's just the hardest part is figuring out what the base is and what the perimeter is. Always for the base. But let's try another one to see. Let me just erase all this just to make it easier to look at for the second example. Okay. And again, my advice, just try to figure out what the base is, try to figure out what the perimeter is, and by base, I mean figure out the area of the base. And once you get all that, it becomes so much easier to work. So, let's get another pyramid, right? We have a pyramid. Sorry if it's crooked. So you have a pyramid right there. We know that this term here, let's make this 6 feet, right? So we know that the length is 6 feet. Let's make this here 5 feet. And let's keep this here at, let's do 4 feet. Okay? So we know that that's 5 feet. We know that this is 4 feet. And we know that this is 6 feet. And again, before we start anything, before we even move on to the formula, let's just figure out what we have, right? And the formula itself is capital B plus a half PL. Let's figure out what we need to know. We need to know what the area of the base is. We need to know what the perimeter is. The easiest one should be L. We know that L in this case is 6, right? And the length is always how long that pyramid is going to be. To figure out area of the base and perimeter of the base, that's where these numbers start coming in handy. So to figure out the first one, right? The area of the base, we're dealing with this base here, right? We're dealing with that base here. And since it's a rectangle, we know that the formula to find area of a rectangle is length times width, right? And in this case, we know that the length of the rectangle is 5, and we know that the width of the rectangle is 4. So all we're gonna do, it's just end up substituting, right? We know that the length is 5. We know that the width is 4. And we know that 5 times 4 is 20. So right now we know that the base is 20, right? We know that base, I'll write it in a different color, just so it becomes easier to see. We know in this case that the base is 20, right? We know that the length is 6, and now let's find what the perimeter is going to be, right? And since we're dealing with perimeter again, perimeter of the base, right? We want to figure out how much space is actually on the outside, right? We want to figure out how much space goes around the base. And to find perimeter, you always want to add up, right? Always want to add. So in this case, we know that this side is 5. We know that that side is 4. So let's not forget again, since it's the entire perimeter, you need everything that's going around. So if that's 5, we know that the back is also 5, right? If the right side is 4, we know that the left side is also 4. And so now all we're going to do is we're going to take all our sides. We know that that side is 4. We know that this side is 5. We know that this side is 4. And we know that the back part is 5. And when you're dealing with perimeter, you just add everything up. Add up all the bases. So it's going to be 5 plus 4 plus 5 plus 4, right? And all I did, I just took the 2 4s, I took the 2 5s, and since it's perimeter, we add them all up, which is 5 plus 4 is 9, 9 plus 5 is 14, 14 plus 4 is 18. So we know that the perimeter is 18. Okay? Perimeter is 18. And once we have this again, the second that you figure out all of that, the rest of the problem becomes so much easier now to see. Just because once you have that, it's just substituting it into the formula, right? And again, I'll write it down here just so you guys can see it better. Plus a half PL, right? So once you have this, we know that the base is 20, which again, we did by finding the area of the base, which was length times width. 5 times 4 was 20, right? plus, bring down the half. We know that the perimeter is 18. We know that the length is 6. And again, all I did, I just took all of these terms and substituted them. Base was 20 plus a half. Perimeter was 18. And the length was 6. And again, once you get it to this, it's just before you add, multiplying, right? Let's take care of those parentheses over there. And since it's next to each other, you're gonna multiply it, right? So let's bring down the 20. Let's bring down the plus. Let's bring down the half. We know that 18 times 6 is gonna give us 108. And all I did 18 times 6, and it gave us 108. Once you have that again, before you want to add, you always want to multiply. So let's take care of that half of 108. So let's bring down the 20. Let's bring down the plus. We know that half of 108 is 54. And again, some of you may like saying half of 108. Other people may prefer to do 108 divided by 2. In the end, it's the exact same thing. If you do 108 divided by 2, it's going to give you 54. And once you're at this step, last step is just to add. We know that 20 plus 54 is going to give us 74. Again, don't forget the units, which is feet. And then since it's surface area, since we're dealing with surface area is always squared. Don't forget that, guys. And so again, when we're dealing with this pyramid, we know that the surface area, how much space on the outside, is actually 74 feet squared. Again, it looks complicated, and it looks much more complicated because it's all gathered on one whiteboard, smaller whiteboard than you guys are used to. But again, the length of the pyramid is always simple. To figure out the area of the base, just remember, you always multiply length times width. 5 times 4 gives us 20. And to find the perimeter of the base, it's always adding up all the sides on the base. So since that's 5 and that's 4, that's going to be 5 and that's 4. Add them all up together, gives us 18. Again, once you find that, it becomes so much easier. Again, if you guys need any extra help with this, feel free to reach out to me. Let me know. More than happy to help out extra if you guys need to. But everything else, take care. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye, guys.